welcome back to the History of Video Games Part 9. Today we'll finish off with the current console generation, the 7th console generation. And this generation of course starts with Microsoft and their Xbox 360, released in 2005. The Xbox 360 really utilized most of the major innovations that the previous Xbox became known for. In many ways it was important for Microsoft that the Xbox 360 came out much sooner than Nintendo's or Sony's next generation consoles, because at this time Nintendo and Sony were both kind of pondering what their next move in this generation would be. Sony didn't really have an incentive to bring out their next new console in reaction to the Xbox 360 because the PlayStation 2 was of course doing so well. And Nintendo was still trying to regain its composure from having lost out to the Xbox in the previous generation. And while the 360 did have its toothing problems, like the infamous Red Ring of Death, Microsoft used the time that they had to their advantage to fix the early problems that they had with the 360, and as a result, build up a very strong supporter base for this console. Yes, people may hate Microsoft for one reason or another, but the one thing you can say about them, when there is a major problem with one of their products, they usually do their best to fix them. Now, as mentioned last time, Nintendo was having difficulties competing with the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox. It really lacked a competitive edge compared to those systems, despite the fact that the GameCube was technologically slightly more advanced. But the Xbox and the PlayStation 2 made better uses of certain new innovations that were being brought in from the computer side of things, like online multiplayer, DVD compatibility. But Nintendo had devoted itself to being strictly a gamer system. As mentioned before, they didn't really have any other unique releases besides the ones they made themselves. So whereas going from the 5th to the 6th generation, Nintendo had decided that it was going to do good on the terms of its competitors. Going from the 6th to 7th generation, instead of trying to beat the other guys at their own game, Nintendo decided that it was gonna do something completely different, and hence we have the Nintendo Wii. The major innovation of which was its motion sensing controller, which admittedly immediately gave it the most unique gameplay experience that you would have. I mean, I will confess that I did enjoy Wii Sports immensely when it came out. Metroid Prime 3 admittedly became my favorite FPS game because of that. And also Nintendo decided that it was finally going to take full advantage of the online playability. Yes, it perhaps didn't have quite the intricacies of the Xbox 360, but Nintendo decided that it was at least going to have very strong online services. Like my personal favorite, the Virtual Console. People had to wait for a little while before Sony came out with the PlayStation 3, and I do have to be perfectly honest that I was not wowed by the PlayStation 3. I was even slightly awestruck by the PlayStation 2, despite what its initial trump card was. When we saw that the PlayStation 3 was there basically just to win the format war between HD DVDs and Blu-ray, I kinda got the sense that Sony was just phoning this in. A lot of people actually thought that the PlayStation 3 was going to fail because it was easily going to be the most expensive system on the market. But I think those people would have done well to make a little reality check. This is Sony we're talking about, the biggest electronics company on the planet. So as you can tell, I don't have a lot to say about the PlayStation 3 other than the fact that it was the most affordable Blu-ray player. Hell, I'd have more to say about this if they'd actually released that cool-looking banana controller as their standard controller instead of, you know, just another DualShock. So in my view, 7 years into this generation, I don't personally consider it any surprise why the Nintendo Wii is currently the best-selling console on the market. Its sales advantage admittedly to the Xbox and PlayStation is only 2-1, but Nintendo effectively did in this generation what the PlayStation did in the last, which was to expand the market of video gaming to a completely new audience. Yes, of course, this has led to this unfortunate little squabble amongst gamers about this whole hardcore versus casual gaming market. But in order for video games to really have a sustainable existence, they really need to cater not just to people who want to play games like this, but also to people who want to play games like this. Because eventually that's what's gonna lead them to playing more video games. Or maybe they'll give up video games altogether at some point. Point being is that we cannot forget just how exponentially the whole video game market has expanded throughout really the 40 years of the existence of the video game market. And one thing that this generation has definitely proven is the second big lesson of this series: when something is popular, copy it. So we come to the end of the history of console gaming in general, and also arcade gaming like we mentioned last time. I've really had to condense a lot of the information in here just so that each video would deal with really like 4 major topics at a time, and as a result we haven't had a lot of time to talk about individual games and stuff, because that would have taken even more time. And for those of you who are feeling a little disappointed about that, I point to Gexup's excellent video game genres series, which deals with different video game genres, explaining their histories and how they have developed over time. And honestly, these kinds of topics are actually much more interesting to me than the corporate battles and everything, but it's important to understand just how the dynamics of the console industry have worked throughout this 40-year history, because many of the important lessons that we have learned from it really still apply to this day. Just because you're first doesn't make you the best. When something is popular, copy it. Unless you're Sega, an over-aggressive marketing campaign will never get you anywhere. Deliver what you promise. I can't say exactly don't lie to the public, because so many effective lies have been told in the video game industry, and really in any successful industry there is some degree of lying. So rule number 5, if you're gonna lie, make it a very good lie. And finally, I like to say that the video game industry as it exists today, we can really consider the combined legacy of two companies, which are Nintendo and Sony. Yes, Atari did effectively create the video game market, they also effectively almost destroyed it. Nintendo is the company that came in, gave us the regulations of licensing agreements, and this was very, very important, because it prevented another video game crash from ever happening again. And Sony's contribution, of course, is very important, because Sony expanded the market so tremendously with both of their first two PlayStations, and that work is being really continued by the Wii. But now that we are done with the history of console gaming, like I promised last time, the History of Video Games Part 10 will be all about the history of computer gaming, and I want to apologize ahead of time, because I am sure that the 10th part of this series is not gonna be as good as the parts that came before it. Now, just to remind everyone, we've been talking about each console generation more or less in one video, with the exception of the 5th console generation. In other words, I spent between 10 to 15 minutes talking about time spans of about 5 years, and in the next video, I will be using that same amount of time to try and talk about really 3.5 decades of computer gaming. And though I will try to get in as many important technological and hardware and all sorts of innovations that have come throughout the years, I don't really have that same kind of insight into the computer gaming industry as I do with the console gaming industry. I mean, yes, I did make these notes long before I started committing anything on a webcam, but really all the videos up till now have been the product of me sitting in front of a webcam for about half an hour talking. I've only had to do fact-checking like 3 times throughout this whole series, and only twice have I had to correct something, which is not to say that everything in the videos is absolutely correct. There are probably mistakes I've made, ones that I haven't noticed, and ones you will notice once you look a bit closely. But the point being is that most of the stuff that I've said on camera, I've said spontaneously. I've known this information from before, and I've been able to collect it all in my head, and so just for those reasons, Part 10 is not going to be as in-depth or as good as the previous videos in this series. I just want people to have realistic expectations. And just to make up for that fact, I will be doing something I haven't done with the previous videos, which is at the end of Part 10, I will list what I think are the 10 most important computer games throughout history. See you on the next one.
You know why it's called the Xbox 360, don't ya? When you see it, you'll turn 360 degrees and walk away.
360 degrees is a full circle. If I turned 360 degrees, I would be where I started.
You're good.
Touché!